You cannot put a dollar figure on a place that taught a sharecropper's daughter she was somebody. But they sent a man to my college with a spreadsheet that swore you could, and a plan to sell off all the parts of it that did not, as he liked to say, pencil out. That was his very first mistake, and it turned out to be a large one. I'm going to tell you how the people that man dismissed as sentimental ended up saving the very thing he was hired to save, and how they did it by handing the keys to the one woman not a single soul on that board had ever once thought to ask. My name is Dr. Cornelia Quarles, though for 40 years the students at Hartwell College have just called me Dr. Nellie. I am 61 years old. I have taught at Hartwell, a small, historically black college in Eden Springs, Ohio, since I was a young woman. And somewhere in those 40 years, I stopped being just a professor and became something the college did not have a title for. I became the one who held it together, the one the scared freshmen came to at midnight, the one who knew every student's name and most of their mothers' names too. And when the presidency came open and the board went looking for a savior, they looked right past me, the way you look past the furniture, and they brought in a stranger. I want to tell you how that turned out. But before I do, let me speak to one particular person listening tonight. If you have ever been the true heart of a place, the one who actually held it together, the one everybody leaned on, and then watched the people in charge overlook you completely and hand the leadership to some flashy outsider who did not love it the way you did, tell me about it in the comments. Tell me what you were holding up that they never even noticed. Because I have a feeling this room is going to fill up tonight with the overlooked backbones of 100 places that would have fallen down without them. And I want every one of you in here with me. Now, to understand any of this, you have to understand what Hartwell College is. And what it is a promise. In the year 1867, 2 years after the war that ended slavery, a group of people who had themselves been enslaved not long before got together with a free-born African Methodist bishop named Josiah Hartwell, and they decided to build a college. Think about the audacity of that. They could not, most of them, read. They had nothing. They had just come up out of bondage with the clothes on their backs. And the first thing they thought to do with their freedom was to build a place to educate children who had not even been born yet, children they themselves would never live to meet. They laid the bricks of the first building with their own hands. They named it Founders Hall. And on my desk, to this very day, sits one of those original bricks, given to me by my own mentor when I first came to teach. And she told me, Cornelia, when this work gets hard, and it will, you hold this brick. And you remember it was set in place by a man who had been somebody's property 10 years before, and who believed, against every bit of evidence his life had given him, that his great-grandchildren deserved a college. You hold that, she said, and you tell me your problem is too big. I have held that brick on a great many hard days. I held it the year we almost could not make payroll. I held it the night a student of mine, a brilliant boy with no people and no money, sat in my office and told me he was going to drop out. And I talked him into staying, and he sits on a federal bench now. The brick is rough, and the mortar still clings to one edge, and when you turn it just so in the light, you can make out, pressed into the clay before it was ever fired, the faint print of a thumb. A real thumb. A real hand, a real person, long gone now, whose name nobody thought to write down, who stood in an Ohio field in 1867 and pressed a brick into shape so that I could stand in a classroom in our own century and tell his great-great-grandchildren that they were somebody. You want to talk to me about return on investment? That thumbprint is the only return that has ever mattered, and it is the whole reason any of us were ever there at all. That is what Hartwell is. It is not a business. It was never a business. It is a promise that freed people made to the future. And every single one of us who has worked there has understood that we were not employees. We were keepers of that promise. And I want to be plain about the difference, because the difference is the whole story. A business exists to make money. If a part of it stops making money, you cut that part off. And that is not cruelty. That is simply what a business is. That is it doing its job correctly. But a promise is the opposite kind of thing entirely. A promise is precisely the part you do not cut off when it stops being convenient. A promise is the thing you keep, especially when it costs you. The day you start running a promise the way you run a business is the very day it stops being a promise at all and becomes just another store. Hartwell had survived 150 years of being broke, of furnaces that died in January and roofs that leaked, and autumns when the lights very nearly got shut off. And it survived every bit of it for one reason, which is that the people who ran it always understood they were keeping a promise and not minding a store. And then, in our fear, we handed it to a man who only knew how to mind a store. I taught literature, but that was almost beside the point. What I really did for 40 years was the same thing the founders did. I looked at young people the world had already counted out, the first in their families to go to college, kids from hard places with frightened eyes, and I told them, with my whole chest, you are somebody. You belong here. You can do this. And I stayed up nights with them, and I fed them when the dining hall money ran out. And I went to their weddings, and I buried their parents, and I held their babies. And across 40 years, I built something with those students that I did not have a name for and did not think to count. Because you do not count love. You just give it. Let me tell you about one of my children, so you understand what I mean, because I do not mean it as a figure of speech. Years ago, a girl came to me, a freshman, brilliant and terrified, the first in her whole family line ever to set foot inside a college. She was failing, and not because she could not do the work. She was failing because some voice down inside her, the one this country installs in our children so very early, kept whispering that she did not belong, that any minute now somebody was going to figure out she was a fraud and send her home where she came from. So I did not tutor that girl in literature. I tutored her in belonging. I sat with her every single week and I told her the truth about herself, over and over, until the day finally came when she could hear it, and she stopped failing. And she graduated, and she went on and earned a doctorate of her own, and she teaches now. And somewhere this very evening, there is a frightened freshman sitting in her office, hearing the exact same truth I once told her. That is what a place like Hartwell makes, not graduates, a chain. And every link in that chain is held together by some teacher choosing to love a student the world had already given up on. You cannot put that on a balance sheet, but it is the realest thing I know in this world. And it turned out, in the end, that the thing I had been quietly building all those years was the only thing that could save the whole college. But I am getting ahead of myself. I should tell you that I was one of those frightened children myself once. I came to Hartwell at 18 from a little town down in the Ohio bottoms, the daughter of people who cleaned other folks' office buildings at night. And I did not believe, in my own secret heart, that a girl like me had any business inside a college at all. And a professor at Hartwell, a woman who has been gone many years now, the very same woman who would later put that brick in my hands, looked at me across her desk and saw straight through my fear and decided that I was worth her time. She is the reason I have a doctorate. She is the reason for every single thing I have ever done with my one life. And when I finished my own schooling, and the big universities came calling, with their salaries and their prestige, I turned down every last one of them, and I came home to Hartwell. Because somebody had kept a promise to me, and I intended to spend my life keeping it forward. So when Dorian Halsey looked at me and saw an unprofitable old professor of an unprofitable old subject, what he was actually looking at, though he never knew it, was the entire return on a promise an enslaved man had made in 1867. He simply did not have the eyes for it. Here is the trouble. A college like Hartwell has always run on a prayer and a shoestring. We were never rich. The big universities have endowments in the billions. We had alumni who sent what they could and a furnace that needed replacing. And a few years back, the money got truly frightening. Enrollment dipped, a big grant did not come through, and suddenly there was real talk that Hartwell might not survive, might have to close its doors after more than 150 years. So the board, in a panic, went looking for a savior with a business mind, and they found Dr. Dorian Halsey. And the board never once considered me, for the same reason boards everywhere overlook the very women holding their institutions up. I did not look like their idea of a leader. I had not spent my career climbing and collecting titles. I had spent it in classrooms and dormitory rooms and hospital waiting rooms, doing the unmeasurable work of raising up human beings. And that work is invisible to people trained to respect only the work that announces itself. I was a 61-year-old woman who wore the same cardigan to every faculty meeting and happened to know where the spare key to the chapel was kept. It never occurred to them that knowing where the spare key to the chapel was kept might be the single most important qualification in the building. They wanted someone who could talk impressively about Hartwell. They looked right past the only person who actually was Hartwell. Now, I want to be fair to the man, because this is not a story about a villain. Dorian Halsey was about 50, polished as a riverstone, with degrees and a confident way of talking about metrics and rebranding and strategic realignment. He had run things before, and I do believe, in his own way, that he thought he was going to save us. But Dorian Halsey had never in his life been a keeper of a promise. He had been a manager of assets. And when he looked at Hartwell, he did not see what the founders saw. He saw an inefficient little college sitting on some valuable real estate with too many small programs that did not pencil out and a sleepy alumni base he intended to squeeze. He looked at a promise and he saw a balance sheet, and he set about, with great energy and total sincerity, to fix us to death. And his plans, Lord, he wanted to cut the programs that did not turn a profit, which is most of what a small college teaches. He wanted to lay off the longtime faculty, the ones who cost the most, the ones who were the soul of the place, and replace us with part-timers he could pay next to nothing. And the part that took my breath away, he wanted to sell Founders Hall. That building, the one the freed people laid brick by brick with their own hands, was old and needed work and sat on a corner a developer wanted. And to Dorian Halsey, it was simply an underperforming asset to be liquidated. He stood up in a meeting and called it, and I will never forget the phrase, an opportunity to monetize underutilized physical plant. He was talking about the first thing our founders ever built. He did not know what he was holding. He did not even know there was anything to know. He held what they called listening sessions, which is a thing people do after they have already decided. He would stand up in his good suit in front of a room full of weeping alumni and longtime faculty, and he would nod gravely and use words like difficult choices and sustainability and right-sizing. And you understood, watching him, that he genuinely could not hear what that room was trying to tell him, because the room was speaking a language the man did not have. The room was speaking love and grief and legacy. The man only spoke money. When an old graduate stood up, shaking, and said, "I was the first man in my family who was not a sharecropper, and it was because of this school, Doctor," Halsey thanked him warmly for his comment and advanced to the next slide. He was not being cruel. He was deaf. He had been trained in all of his fine programs to hear only the one thin frequency that money broadcasts on. And so the whole rich symphony of what that college truly was simply did not register in his ears at all. And a man who cannot hear the very thing he is standing on will saw straight through it, smiling, certain the whole time that he is doing good and necessary work. And me? He had no use for me at all. To Dorian Halsey, I was a sentimental old woman, a relic, an expensive professor of an unprofitable subject who kept talking about love and promises in meetings that were supposed to be about money. He was perfectly polite. He just looked straight through me, the way the board had, and he started dismantling, one piece at a time, the only home a great many people in this world had ever truly had. He did not even fight with me, which was somehow worse. A fight would have meant he saw me as a person with standing, an opponent worth the trouble of opposing. He simply routed around me, the way water roots around a stone. My name came off the committees. My calls to his office reached an assistant, and then reached nowhere. 40 years I had given that place, and in the span of a single semester, I had become a ghost in my own house. I have been underestimated many times, the way every woman who looks like me has been. But there is a particular cold to being underestimated by someone so certain of your irrelevance that he cannot even be bothered to dislike you. I was not Dorian Halsey's enemy. To that man, I was weather. And I let him go right on thinking so, all the way up until the day the weather changed on him. And I am going to be honest with you about the lowest point, because I think you need to hear it. I almost let him. I was 61 years old. I had given that college 40 years, and the thanks I got was to be looked through by a man young enough to be my son, who thought my life's work was a line item. They were offering early retirement packages, and I sat in my office with the papers, and I looked around at the books and the photographs of 40 years of students, and I thought, you are tired, Cornelia. The place is dying anyway. Let the young man have his spreadsheet. Go home with your dignity while you still have some. Take the package. Why should you go down with a ship the captains themselves have decided to scuttle? And I started to clean out my desk. And my hand fell on that brick. That old brick from Founders Hall, and I picked it up, and it was heavy in my hand, the way it has always been heavy. And I thought about the man who said it, who had been a slave, who had nothing, who built a college anyway for children he would never meet. And I thought, he did not take the package. He did not go home with his dignity while he still had some. He had no dignity that anybody would give him, and he built a college for strangers out of pure, stubborn faith. And here I was, with a doctorate and a pension and 40 years of standing, fixing to quit because a man in a good suit had hurt my feelings. I put that brick back down on my desk. I put the retirement papers in the shredder, and I sat back down in my chair. And I am not ashamed to tell you that I wept. The way you weep when you have been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and you have finally decided that you are not going to set it down after all. Because I understood something, sitting there with that old brick in my hand. I had spent 40 years telling frightened young people that they were somebody, that they belonged, that they could do the hard thing. And here I was, ready to walk straight out the door precisely because a man in a good suit had managed to make me feel like nobody, like I did not belong in the fight, like the hard thing was finally too hard. I had been preaching a sermon for 40 years that, in the very moment of my own testing, I had nearly failed to live. Well, not that day. If I was going to keep telling my children to stand up, then I had best be willing to stand up myself, at 61 years old. With no title and no power and nothing whatsoever on my side but a brick and 40 years of love. And I decided that they were going to have to carry me out of Hartwell, because I was not about to be the keeper who let the promise die on her watch. But here is the thing. I did not have any power. I want to be clear about that, because it is the heart of all of this. I had no title that mattered. I was not on the board. Dorian Halsey was the president, and he had the authority, and I was one tired professor he could ignore. I could not stop him with rank, because I did not have any. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I did the thing I had been doing for 40 years. I picked up the phone, and I started calling my children. I mean, my students. 40 years of them. Because while Dorian Halsey had been studying our balance sheet, he had never once thought to ask the only question that mattered, which was, who loves this place, and what will they do for it? He saw a sleepy alumni base to be squeezed. He did not understand that those were not donors on a list. Those were my babies. That was the lawyer in Columbus I had tutored through freshman composition when she wanted to quit. That was the surgeon in Cleveland whose mother I had sat with in the hospital. That was the school teacher and the pastor and the city councilman and the businesswoman, thousands of them, scattered all over this country. And not one of them loved Hartwell because of its metrics. They loved it because somewhere in that place, somebody, and very often it was me, had looked at them when they were 18 and scared and told them they were somebody. You cannot put that on a spreadsheet. Dorian Halsey never even knew it was there. And it was the most powerful thing the college owned. You see, a man like Dorian Halsey believes that power flows downward from the top, like water running down a hill. And inside that picture, I sat at the very bottom of it, a mere professor, powerless. But that picture is a lie, and it is the most useful lie the powerful have ever told. Because real power, the kind that actually moves the world, does not flow downward from a title at all. It pools, quietly, over years, in the trust between people. And I had been gathering that kind of power for 40 years, without ever once thinking to call it power. One student at a time, one midnight conversation at a time, one funeral and one wedding, and one second chance at a time. I had more of it than the entire board of trustees put together, and not one of them ever knew. The board could fire a president. I could move 4,000 hearts. Those, it turns out, are not the same size at all. So I called them, and I told them the truth. I told them what was happening, that Founders Hall was going to be sold, that the heart was being cut out of the place that made them, and I did not even have to ask. The phone tree I had been building, one student at a time, for 40 years, lit up like the 4th of July. And the alumni did not call the board. They did something far more powerful. They closed their checkbooks. Every alumni dollar, every pledge, every planned gift, they froze all of it. And they sent word to that board, plain as day. Not one more cent, not ever again, as long as that man is selling off our history and gutting the place that raised us. And then the students, my students, the current ones, they walked out of their classes and they gathered on the lawn in front of Founders Hall, hundreds of them, and they would not move. They were not destructive about it. That is not how I raised them, and that is not how Hartwell has ever done things. They did not break a single window, or shout a single ugly word, or burn one solitary thing. They simply came and sat down on the grass in front of the building their great-grandparents had built, in their sweatshirts with the college name across the front, and they studied. They held their classes right there on the lawn, taught by the very faculty Dr. Halsey was trying to lay off. In the evenings they sang, the old songs, the ones from the chapel. It was the most dignified thing I have ever witnessed in my life. Hundreds of young people refusing, with their whole calm bodies, to let a stranger sell off their inheritance, and doing it exactly the way the founders would have wanted it done, with their books open and their heads held high. The local news came, and then the bigger news came. and the whole country got to see the one thing Dorian Halsey had never been able to see, which was that this was not a failing asset sitting on valuable land. This was a family, and you do not liquidate a family. Do you understand what happened? Dorian Halsey had been hired to fix the finances, and his plan caused the single worst financial catastrophe in the history of the college, because he had touched the one thing you must never touch, which was the love. He had a spreadsheet full of assets, and he had managed to destroy the only asset that was actually keeping the doors open, the faith of the people who had been formed there. The board watched the donations evaporate and the students fill the lawn and the newspapers start to call. And they understood, finally, that the man they brought in to save the college was killing it, and that the thing they had overlooked, the love, the trust, the 40 years of relationships, was the only thing that had ever been holding it up. And the board did the only thing it could do. They let Dorian Halsey go. He did not grovel, and I did not need him to. He left the way he came, polished and certain, telling anyone who would listen that we were a sentimental institution that refused to face economic reality. And maybe in his world, that is true. But he left. And then the board, those same men and women who had looked straight through me for years, came to my office, and they asked me, the relic, the sentimental old woman, the one they never thought to ask, if I would step in and lead Hartwell College. And I will tell you, I did not say yes for them. I looked at those board members and I told them the truth, that I would not have crossed the street for the title and I would not do it on their say-so. And then I told them why I would do it. Because while they were deliberating, a petition had come in, signed by more than 4,000 alumni and every single student on that campus, asking, demanding that I be the one. The people who actually were the college had chosen me, not the board, the family, and you do not say no to your family when they stand up as one and call your name. So I said yes to them, to my students and my alumni, and I told the board they could consider it a happy coincidence that their authority and the will of the people had finally landed in the same place. I did not take any joy in Dorian Halsey's leaving. I want you to understand that, because it matters to me. I did not gloat, and I would not let my students gloat either, because a person who has to be defeated before he can learn a thing has already lost enough. He was not a wicked man. He was a man who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. And the world manufactures a great many men exactly like that, and then hands them our most precious things to manage. And it was not entirely his own fault that he was the kind of tool he had been built into. I simply was not going to let him take the whole building apart looking for the bolts. So when I stood up in front of the college for the very first time as its president, in the very chapel the founders had raised with their own hands, I did not say one single word about the man. I talked about the brick. I held it up high so that every soul in that room could see it. And I told them about the thumbprint pressed into the clay. And I told them that we were not going to run our promise like a store, not ever again. And that the doors of Hartwell College were going to stay open. Because freed people did not build this place on nothing but faith for us to turn around and close it on arithmetic. And the sound that chapel made when I said it, I expect to hear in my ears on the day I die. I have been the president of Hartwell College for 3 years now. We did not sell Founders Hall. We raised the money to restore it instead. And we did it in 90 days. Because once the alumni knew the promise was being kept by one of their own, the money came home like the prodigal son. I watched a check come in from a woman who had graduated 40 years before I ever did. 92 years old, living on a fixed income, who sent $500 and a note written in a shaking hand that said, "I scrubbed floors so my daughter could go to Hartwell. Do not you dare let them sell our hall." I had that note framed. It hangs in the president's office now, where every trustee who walks through that door has no choice but to look at it. Because that is the thing Dorian Halsey, with all of his degrees, never once managed to learn. And it is the thing I most want you to carry out of this whole story. People will give every last thing they have to protect a promise that was once kept to them. And they will give nothing at all, not one thin dime, to prop up a business that treats them like a line item. That man spent a year trying to squeeze water out of a stone, and the entire time, standing not 3 feet from him, was a well 150 years deep. He just could not see it, because you can only ever draw from that well with love. And love was the one tool that man had never, in all his fine training, been issued. I run that college the way the founders built it, as a promise and not a business. And somehow, doing it that way, the books are healthier than they have been in 20 years, because it turns out that love, the thing that did not pencil out, is the best fundraiser God ever made. So let me leave you with this. Every one of you who has been the overlooked heart of a place, they are going to keep handing the titles and the corner offices to the flashy outsiders, the ones who interview well and talk in metrics and have never loved the place a day in their lives. And they are going to look straight through you, the one who actually holds it all together, because what you do does not show up on their charts. They cannot measure it, so they assume it is not there. Let them, because the day is going to come, as it always comes, when the place is in real trouble. And on that day, all the titles and all the spreadsheets in the world are going to be worth exactly nothing. And the only thing that will save it is the very thing they could not see: the love and the trust and the loyalty that you, and only you, spent a lifetime quietly building. They cannot appoint that. They cannot hire that. They cannot fire you and take it with them, because it does not belong to the office. It belongs to you. So you keep building it, even when nobody notices. Even when they look right through you, you are not the furniture. You are the foundation. And one day the whole house is going to have to admit it. I am Dr. Cornelia Quarles. They passed me over to run the college I had given my life to, and they handed it to a stranger with a spreadsheet. And when that stranger nearly sold off the promise that freed people built with their hands, my children, 4,000 strong, stood up on the lawn and chose me. That brick from Founders Hall still sits on my desk in the president's office now. And every spring, when I ring the founders' bell over a new class of graduates, children the founders never lived to meet, I think about a man who had been a slave, who built a college on nothing but faith. And I understand that I have not been keeping that promise. The promise has been keeping me. If you have ever been the overlooked heart of a place that could not have survived without you, get down in the comments and tell me what you were holding up that they never noticed. Somebody scrolling tonight is about to let a flashy stranger convince them that their quiet, faithful work was worth nothing, and they need to see a whole room of us who were overlooked and then proven beyond any doubt to be the foundation the whole thing stood on. And if this story reached you, you already know how to find the next one. Go on and keep building your foundation. They will see it one day. They always do.